The paradox of kindness, ancient wisdom for a modern heart. Kindness, what a simple, beautiful word. Doesn't it stir something deep within you? Across time and cultures, it has been celebrated as one of the highest virtues. From the teachings of the Buddha to the whispers of your grandmother's advice, kindness is that golden thread weaving through the human experience. And yet, why does it sometimes hurt? Why are acts of kindness met not with gratitude but with indifference, exploitation, or even disdain? Have you ever asked yourself, is it me? Am I too soft, too accommodating? This is not a modern dilemma, it is a timeless paradox. And, my friend, it is worth diving into, not with fear, but with the curiosity of a seeker and the heart of a philosopher. Kindness, at its core, is an offering. It is not simply a gesture but a bridge, a silent declaration that we are all interconnected. Yet this very offering can leave one vulnerable. In giving, we expose a tender part of ourselves, one that hopes for recognition, for reciprocity, or at the very least, acknowledgement. When these hopes are unmet, the sting of rejection or misunderstanding cuts deep, leaving scars that make us question our intentions and, sometimes, the world itself. Ancient texts and stories from various traditions echo this paradox. The Buddha, for instance, taught metta, loving kindness, as an unbounded love that expects nothing in return. But even he acknowledged the challenge of practicing kindness in a world filled with greed, anger, and ignorance. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advises acting selflessly, detached from the fruits of one's actions, a principle that resonates with the idea of offering kindness for its own sake, not for any external reward. The modern heart, however, struggles with this detachment. We live in a world that often equates kindness with weakness, where the transactional nature of relationships can overshadow genuine altruism. The phrase, "nice guys finish last," isn't just a casual observation, it's a reflection of a societal tension that questions the value of being kind when it seems to cost more than it gives. But here lies the deeper truth of the paradox: kindness is not just about the other person, it is also about you. The act of kindness is an affirmation of your values, your humanity, and your capacity to rise above the pettiness of the world. It is a mirror reflecting the kind of person you wish to be, regardless of how others respond. When kindness hurts, it invites us to examine not only our expectations but also our boundaries. Are we giving freely, or are we silently hoping for validation? Are we offering kindness out of abundance, or are we depleting ourselves in the process? True kindness, like any other virtue, must be cultivated with wisdom. It requires knowing when to give and when to step back, when to open your heart and when to protect it. And so, the paradox of kindness becomes a profound teacher. It asks us to embrace both the joy and the pain it brings, to navigate the complexities of human interaction with grace and resilience. Kindness is not always about grand gestures or self-sacrifice. Sometimes, it is as simple as a smile, a listening ear, or a moment of patience. In a world that often feels cold and transactional, your kindness is an act of quiet rebellion, a statement that there is still beauty and warmth in the human spirit. Yes, it may sometimes hurt. Yes, it may go unappreciated. But the paradox of kindness is also its power. The more you practice it, the more you transform, not just the world around you but also yourself. So, lean into this paradox, my friend. Let it stretch your heart and deepen your wisdom. For in the end, kindness is not about what you get, it's about who you become. The eternal question, why does kindness go awry? Even the Buddha, a being of boundless compassion, faced ridicule. Kindness, you see, is not always enough. It needs a companion, wisdom. Without discernment, kindness can feel like pouring water into a sieve. It flows endlessly, yet nothing remains. Why is this so? Let me take you on a journey. Imagine yourself at a tranquil monastery, nestled amidst mountains where the clouds kiss the earth. There, a disciple named Asoka begins his own quest to understand this paradox. Ahsoka, eager to cultivate compassion, approached his teacher with a troubled heart one morning. "Master," he began, "I have offered food to the hungry, shelter to the lost, and words of comfort to the grieving. Yet, often my kindness is met with scorn or indifference. Why does my effort feel like rain falling on barren ground?" The teacher, a sage with decades of contemplation etched into his gentle eyes, paused and then spoke. "Ahsoka, your heart is pure, and your intentions are noble. But kindness, like fire, must be tended carefully. Left unchecked, it can either burn too fiercely or extinguish itself in the wind. Let me tell you a story." He gestured to the mountains beyond the monastery, their peaks shrouded in mist. "Long ago, there lived a kind-hearted man in a village at the base of these mountains. He was so generous that he would give away everything he owned to those in need. At first, the villagers praised him, calling him a saint. But over time, some began to take advantage of his nature. They demanded more, often without gratitude. Others ridiculed him, saying, 'What kind of fool gives away all he has?' His kindness became a burden, not because of what he gave, but because he lacked the wisdom to balance giving with self-preservation. In time, he grew resentful and bitter, his well of compassion running dry." Ahsoka listened intently, his brow furrowed in thought. "Are you saying kindness has limits?" he asked. The teacher smiled. "Not limits, but conditions. Kindness without wisdom is like a river without banks. It spills everywhere, losing its direction and purpose. True compassion does not mean saying yes to everyone. Sometimes, the most compassionate act is to say no, or to step back, allowing others to face the consequences of their actions. This is not selfishness, it is discernment." The teacher then handed Ahsoka a small bowl filled with water. "Pour this onto the earth," he instructed. Ahsoka obeyed, watching as the water soaked into the soil, leaving only dampness behind. "Now," the teacher continued, "pour the same water into this stone basin." Ahsoka poured again, this time seeing the water remain clear and contained. "The earth absorbed the water, leaving nothing to sustain you. The basin held it, preserving its essence. Your kindness, Ahsoka, must find its own basin, a balance between giving and retaining your strength." Ahsoka nodded slowly, the weight of the lesson sinking in. "So, to give wisely is to protect the source of my kindness?" "Yes," the teacher affirmed. "Kindness flows not only to others but also back to yourself. To truly sustain compassion, you must nourish the wellspring within you." From that day forward, Ahsoka approached his acts of kindness with a newfound understanding. He learned to discern when to give fully and when to reserve his energy. He realized that kindness, paired with wisdom, was not just an act, it was a way of being, one that honored both the giver and the receiver. And so, the eternal question, why does kindness go awry, finds its answer. It falters not because kindness itself is flawed, but because it requires the steady hand of wisdom to guide its course. In its truest form, kindness is not about losing yourself in service but finding harmony between selflessness and self-care. As the clouds lifted from the mountains, revealing their majestic peaks, Ahsoka felt a lightness in his heart. He had not abandoned kindness, he had refined it, allowing it to flow not like water into a sieve, but like a river toward the sea, carrying its blessings with purpose and grace. The Tale of the Lantern and the Wind. Once, the master began, there was a lantern that shone brightly in a small village. Its light guided travelers, brought warmth to cold nights, and illuminated homes. But one day, a strong wind blew through the village. Instead of shielding itself, the lantern tried to shine even brighter, fighting against the wind. Eventually, the lantern burned all its oil and went dark. The villagers, now lost in darkness, blamed the lantern for failing them. But in truth, it was the lantern's inability to protect its own flame that caused its downfall. Ahsoka listened intently. "Master, what could the lantern have done?" The master replied, the lantern's duty was not just to give light but to guard its own flame. Kindness is like that flame. If you let external forces drain you without replenishing your energy, your light will go out. True kindness knows when to shine and when to shield itself. The master paused and added, "Let me explain further, Ahsoka. Imagine that the lantern, instead of exhausting itself against the wind, had been placed inside a glass case. This case would not dim the light but protect it from the gusts. Its glow would remain steady, and the oil would last longer, ensuring that it could continue to serve the village. The villagers would have been saved from the darkness, not because the lantern fought harder, but because it had the wisdom to protect its flame." Ahsoka furrowed his brow. "But, Master, doesn't shielding the flame mean limiting the light it gives to others?" The master smiled. "Not at all, Ahsoka. The case does not diminish the light, it enhances it by ensuring its longevity. Kindness, too, needs boundaries. It is not about withholding generosity but about sustaining it. When you deplete yourself entirely in the name of kindness, you risk losing your ability to give altogether. Protecting your inner flame allows you to be a steady source of light, not a fleeting burst." The lesson began to take root in Ahsoka's heart. He thought of his own acts of kindness, how he had often given until he felt drained, leaving himself with little energy or joy. He realized that he had been like the lantern, burning brightly but recklessly, until the winds of life extinguished his flame. The master continued, "Kindness is not about burning yourself out for the sake of others. It is about cultivating a balance. Consider the wind, not as an enemy, but as a force to work with. When you learn to bend with it rather than resist, you preserve your strength. And when the wind calms, your flame will still be there, ready to shine." The next day, Ahsoka practiced what he had learned. When a villager approached him with a request for help, he paused and reflected. Instead of agreeing immediately, he assessed his own energy and resources. He realized he could not assist fully at that moment without depleting himself further. So, he offered a smaller act of help, one that still carried kindness but allowed him to conserve his energy. To his surprise, the villager accepted gratefully, appreciating even the modest assistance. In time, Ahsoka became known as a beacon of wisdom and compassion. He was no longer the disciple who gave until he had nothing left. Instead, he embodied the lesson of the lantern, his kindness steady, his flame protected, and his light enduring through the winds of life. The tale of the lantern and the wind is more than just a story, it is a reminder for all who strive to live kindly. Guarding your flame is not selfish, it is essential. For only by preserving your light can you continue to illuminate the path for others, even in the fiercest of winds. The disciple's journey, a new challenge. Ahsoka carried this lesson in his heart. On his next journey into the village, he encountered a woman named Mira. Mira had lost her way in the forest and was desperate for help. Ahsoka guided her, shared his food, and ensured her safety. As they walked, Mira shared her story. She was a merchant who traveled between villages, her bags laden with goods she traded for her livelihood. Her journey had gone awry when she wandered off the main path in search of a shortcut and became disoriented. Ahsoka listened attentively, offering words of reassurance as they made their way through the dense trees. When they finally reached the edge of the forest, Mira sighed in relief. However, her relief quickly turned to hesitation as she glanced at her belongings. She asked Ahsoka, "Would you carry my load the rest of the way to my home? It's still a long walk, and I'm exhausted from being lost." Ahsoka paused, considering her request. The lesson he had learned from his master echoed in his mind. True kindness is not limitless but rather intentional and mindful of one's capacity. He looked at the setting sun and then at Mira. "I've helped you reach safety," he said gently, his voice calm and steady. "But carrying your load all the way would prevent me from returning to the monastery before dark. I hope you understand." Mira looked startled, clearly unaccustomed to someone declining her request. She opened her mouth to protest but then closed it, realizing the truth in his words. Finally, she nodded, her expression softening. "Thank you for all you've done," she said sincerely. As Ahsoka turned back toward the path leading to the monastery, he felt an unexpected lightness within him. For the first time, he truly understood the balance between compassion and self-respect. Setting boundaries did not diminish his kindness, it strengthened it, allowing him to help without sacrificing his own well-being. Mira watched him leave, her thoughts lingering on his words. She began to reflect on her own actions and realized that kindness should not be taken for granted. Though she carried her belongings the rest of the way, she did so with a new appreciation for the help Ahsoka had already given. For Ahsoka, the encounter with Mira became a pivotal moment in his journey as a disciple. It reinforced the teachings of his master, not as rigid rules but as living principles. The experience taught him that helping others was not about endlessly giving, it was about giving wisely, ensuring that both the helper and the helped could continue to walk their paths with integrity and strength. The Tale of the River and the Forest. The master shared another story. Once, a river flowed generously through a forest. It gave its water freely, nourishing all, trees, animals, travelers. The trees stretched their roots deep into its banks, drinking eagerly. The animals gathered in great numbers, muddying its once clear waters as they splashed and played. Travelers set up camp along its shores, leaving behind debris and fires that scarred its edges. At first, the river rejoiced in its purpose, believing that its endless giving was a sign of strength. It carried no judgment, only the desire to sustain life around it. But as time passed, the river began to feel the strain. Its waters grew shallow, its currents slowed, and its clarity dimmed. One day, as it trickled weakly through the forest, it cried out in despair, "Why do you exploit me when I give you life?" The forest replied, its voice echoing through the rustling leaves, "Because you do not set boundaries. We assumed you didn't mind. You never told us when to stop, so we kept taking." The river, now a mere shadow of its former self, fell silent. It realized that its silence and limitless giving had invited the abuse that drained it dry. Ahsoka listened intently, and for the first time, he felt the weight of the river's plight within himself. "I see the river's pain," he said softly. It wanted to help but forgot to protect itself. "Master, how does the river protect itself?" The master smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "By knowing its limits and flowing with wisdom. A river that preserves its source will continue to nourish others for generations. But one that gives everything away without replenishment will vanish." Ahsoka closed his eyes, picturing the river learning to flow differently. He imagined it carving pathways that nourished without being overwhelmed, offering water without being depleted. He saw the river choosing when to flow and when to retreat, knowing that in doing so, it preserved its strength to serve. "But Master," Ahsoka asked after a thoughtful pause, "won't the forest suffer if the river stops giving so freely?" "The forest," the Master replied, "will learn to adapt. True harmony is not born of endless giving, it arises when all parts respect one another's limits. By setting boundaries, the river teaches the forest how to thrive without destroying the source of its life." The tale lingered in Ahsoka's heart long after the lesson ended. He carried it with him as a guide, not just for how to help others, but for how to honor his own well-being. Like the river, he resolved to flow with wisdom, nurturing others while safeguarding the source of his strength. Reflecting on our own kindness. Let's pause for a moment. Why are you kind? Is it to uplift others, to offer support in their moments of need, or to create harmony in your surroundings? Or is it something else entirely, a way to avoid conflict, to win approval, or to fulfill an internal narrative about what it means to be a good person? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Kindness, at its core, is a beautiful and transformative force, yet its motivation can shape its impact in profound ways. Ahsoka learned that his kindness stemmed from a desire to embody compassion, a genuine wish to make the world better for those around him. However, this desire came with an unintended cost. He often found himself unable to set boundaries, allowing his kindness to drain his energy and limit his growth. He realized that while his intentions were pure, his inability to say no undermined his efforts to help others sustainably. Can you relate? Have you ever felt that your kindness, though well-intentioned, left you feeling overextended, unappreciated, or even resentful? Perhaps you've agreed to things that weighed heavily on you, simply because saying no felt like a betrayal of your values. Take a moment to examine the roots of your own kindness. Is it truly about compassion, or could it be tied to a fear of disappointing others? Are you motivated by love, or by a desire to prove your worth? These questions might be uncomfortable, but they are the key to transforming kindness from an obligation into a genuine, empowered act. True kindness is not about self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. It is about recognizing that your ability to give depends on your ability to care for yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't make your kindness weaker, it makes it stronger. It ensures that your compassion is sustainable, that it nourishes both the giver and the receiver. Just as Ahsoka learned, the strength of kindness lies not in its quantity but in its wisdom. It is not about how much you give but how thoughtfully and purposefully you offer your care. By reflecting on your motivations and learning to balance giving with self-respect, you can transform kindness into a force that uplifts not just others but also yourself. So, ask yourself, why am I kind? And what can I do to ensure that my kindness is rooted in strength, balance, and authenticity? The Tale of the Bamboo and the Oak. One evening, the master told Ahsoka another story. In a storm, a tall oak tree stood firm, its thick trunk and wide branches unyielding to the fierce winds. It believed its strength was in its rigidity, in its refusal to bow to the storm. Nearby, a bamboo grove danced with the wind. The slender stalk swayed, bending low under the gusts but never snapping. As the storm raged on, the oak strained against the pressure. Its roots clung tightly to the earth, but its stiff branches cracked, and its mighty trunk eventually split apart. When the storm passed, the once proud oak lay shattered on the ground. The bamboo, on the other hand, stood tall, unharmed by the tempest. Its ability to bend and adapt had allowed it to weather the storm without breaking. The bamboo understood the balance of resilience and flexibility, while the oak mistook rigidity for strength. Ahsoka sat in quiet reflection, visualizing the fate of the oak and the enduring grace of the bamboo. After a moment, he asked, "Master, is kindness like the bamboo?" The master smiled and nodded. "Yes, Ahsoka. Kindness, too, must be strong yet flexible. Like the bamboo, it should bend with the world, adapting to its challenges and changes. But it must never break under the weight of others' demands or expectations. True kindness grows from balance, between strength and softness, giving and preserving, compassion and self-respect." Ahsoka thought deeply about the lesson. He had often seen kindness as a form of strength, like the oak standing tall against the world's storms. But now he realized that unyielding kindness could crack under pressure, leaving the giver depleted and broken. The bamboo taught a different kind of strength, a quiet, enduring power rooted in humility and adaptability. It did not resist the wind, it flowed with it, knowing that to yield was not to surrender but to survive. "Master," Ahsoka said, his voice filled with newfound understanding, "if I want my kindness to endure, I must learn to bend like the bamboo. But how do I know when to bend and when to stand firm?" The master placed a hand on Ahsoka's shoulder. "By listening, both to the world and to yourself. The bamboo bends when the wind is strong but stands tall when the air is calm. So too must your kindness respond to the needs of the moment. Be flexible when faced with life's challenges, but always return to your center, your values, your strength, your integrity. This is the way of true kindness." The tale of the bamboo and the oak stayed with Ahsoka long after that evening. Whenever he faced moments of doubt or felt the weight of others' expectations, he thought of the bamboo, swaying gracefully in the storm. In its quiet resilience, he found a model for his own kindness, a strength that could endure, not by resisting the world, but by flowing with it. The power of saying no. When Asoka returned to the village, he practiced a new way of being. He offered help with the same open heart, but this time, he added something new: mindfulness. He observed carefully, taking the time to evaluate the requests that came his way. Instead of automatically saying yes, he paused, reflecting on whether the help being asked for aligned with his values and capacity. He began saying no, politely but firmly, to unreasonable demands. At first, the word felt heavy on his tongue, as if he were betraying the kindness he aspired to embody. But he quickly noticed something remarkable about the responses he received. Some respected him more for his clarity. People who genuinely valued Asoka's help began to see his boundaries as a sign of strength and self-awareness. They appreciated that he was not giving out of obligation but out of genuine care. These individuals adjusted their expectations, offering gratitude for what he could give without resentment for what he couldn't. Others grew angry, revealing their true intentions. To Asoka's surprise, some villagers, who had once seemed warm and affectionate, reacted poorly. Their smiles turned to frowns, and their gratitude soured into frustration. It became clear that their affection had been transactional, rooted in what they could take from him rather than in genuine connection. This experience, though painful, illuminated a golden truth for Asoka: boundaries are not walls, they are the bridges to mutual respect. By saying no when necessary, Asoka wasn't closing himself off from others. He was fostering healthier, more authentic relationships. Over time, Asoka noticed other changes as well. Saying no gave him more energy to focus on the tasks and people that mattered most. He found himself more present, more intentional in his acts of kindness. And in those moments, his kindness shone brighter, no longer diluted by overextension or resentment. He also realized that saying no helped others grow. When he declined unreasonable demands, it forced some villagers to confront their dependence on his help. They began to take responsibility for their own challenges, discovering strength they hadn't known they possessed. The journey wasn't without its struggles. Each no required courage, especially in the face of disappointment or anger. But with every boundary he set, Asoka felt a deepening sense of peace within himself. He understood now that true kindness wasn't about endless giving. It was about giving wisely, in a way that uplifted both himself and those around him. Saying no wasn't the end of kindness, it was the beginning of a more balanced, meaningful way of living it. Asoka had learned to embody compassion without losing himself, and in doing so, he discovered the true power of saying no. How can we apply this wisdom? The Master's teachings resonate deeply, offering timeless insights into the art of balanced living. But how do we bring this harmony into the complexities of modern life? Let us expand on these guiding principles to integrate them more fully into our daily actions and relationships. 1. Pause and reflect. Before rushing to offer help, take a moment to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, am I acting from genuine love or out of a sense of obligation? Will this action uplift both myself and the other person, or will it leave me feeling drained or resentful? This pause is not selfish, it is an act of self-awareness and intentionality. In the whirlwind of modern life, we often overlook this critical step. Picture this scenario: a colleague emails you late at night, asking for urgent help on a project. You're exhausted, already stretched thin, and the thought of saying no makes you uneasy. Do you agree because you truly wish to support them, or because you fear being perceived as unkind or uncooperative? Pausing allows you to step back from the automatic yes and make a conscious decision. It gives you the space to respond in a way that honors your energy while maintaining the integrity of the relationship. 2. Set boundaries with kindness. Saying no does not diminish your kindness, it strengthens it. However, the way you deliver your no matters. Firmness coupled with compassion is the key to setting boundaries that nurture mutual respect. Imagine a friend asks you for a favor you genuinely cannot fulfill. Instead of a curt refusal, consider saying, "I would love to help, but I'm unable to do so right now. Let me know if there's another way I can support you later." This response is clear and honest, but it also communicates care and understanding. It leaves no room for resentment or misunderstanding while reinforcing your own limits. Over time, this practice builds healthier relationships based on respect and authenticity. 3. Let go of attachment. True kindness is an offering, not a transaction. To embody this principle, detach yourself from the need for recognition or approval. This is, perhaps, one of the most challenging lessons to internalize. Humans naturally crave acknowledgement. We want our efforts to be seen and appreciated. But clinging to this need can distort the purity of our kindness. Imagine offering help simply because it uplifts your spirit, not because you expect gratitude or validation in return. How freeing it would be to give without strings attached, to let kindness flow as an expression of who you are rather than a tool for securing praise. This shift in mindset transforms kindness into a deeply personal and liberating act, one that is grounded in your inner values rather than external responses. 4. Balance giving and receiving. You cannot pour from an empty cup. While generosity is beautiful, it must be balanced with self-care. Taking care of your own needs is not selfish, it is essential. Consider the wisdom shared during airplane safety demonstrations. Put on your oxygen mask first before assisting others. This simple instruction is a profound metaphor for life. By nurturing your emotional, physical, and mental well-being, you ensure that you have the energy and stability to support those around you. Think of self-care as a way to refill your reservoir of kindness. Whether it's through rest, solitude, or activities that nourish your soul, these moments of replenishment enable you to give more fully and authentically. 5. Embody softness and strength. Kindness, like water, can be both gentle and powerful. Water flows around obstacles, adapting effortlessly to its environment. Yet, over time, it carves mountains and shapes the earth, demonstrating its quiet strength. Let your kindness mirror this duality. Be flexible and compassionate, adapting to the needs of the moment. But also stand firm in your values and boundaries, ensuring that your kindness never comes at the cost of your sense of self. This balance between softness and strength allows you to engage with the world in a way that is both empowering and sustainable. Your kindness becomes a force of nature, not easily exhausted, but endlessly renewing. By applying these principles, you can transform kindness from a reactive habit into a deliberate and balanced way of life. It becomes not just a gift you offer to others but a practice that enriches your own soul, creating harmony both within and beyond yourself. The final lesson. The Master's closing words echo across Asoka's journey. A river that flows around obstacles remains steady, but one that overflows its banks loses its course. Let your kindness flow freely, yet stay within the boundaries of self-respect and wisdom. True compassion is found in this harmony. Doesn't that fill your heart with a quiet strength? So, dear friend, the next time your kindness feels like it's drowning in a sea of indifference, pause. Ask yourself, am I the lantern forgetting to shield its flame? Am I bending too much, losing my roots? The paradox of kindness is not a failure, it is a call to deepen your wisdom. Let your compassion shine brightly, not as a flicker but as a flame fueled by self-respect and balance. That, truly, is the path to harmony.